All right, we have a special guest with us today. He is the very first Portuguese surfer to qualify for the Elite Championship Tour. He was a national junior champ in 94, 95, the European junior champ in 99, the Hawaiian Triple Crown Rookie of the Year in 2000 after placing runner-up to world champion Sonny Garcia in the World Cup at Sunset Beach. In 2007, he joined the world's best on the CT, and the world's best at the time, they included the legs of Mick Fanning, Kelly Slater, Joel Parkinson, Andy Irons, Taj Burrow, and other elder gods. After a serious knee injury in 2013 and 7 years on the CT, he officially hung up the competitive jersey in 2015, but not before cleaving a huge path of inspiration for surfers around the world. We have Tiago Pires recording just one day before his birthday. Tiago, good to see you again, my friend. Happy early birthday, and thank you for coming on the lineup.
Yeah, Dave, good to see you too, and very good homework.
Yeah, we have to do it on this podcast.
People
will come for us.
A bit, so.
Yeah. What's been going on, man? Where are you talking to us from today?
I am talking to you from the Twin Fin agency office in Belém. You probably heard about the pastéis de nata in Portugal.
Yeah.
You heard about those little tarts that we're kind of famous from. So our office is just around the corner, and Twin Fin is actually my post competitive surf career project. So it started a few years back, actually with another name. In the beginning, had another name, it was just React Sports Management, because I was more just doing a bit of management. That was kind of like my passion. I wanted to do that after doing the tour, but then I slowly started diverging into organizing some out of the box events. So as the years went by, I kind of got more into organizing events and kind of slowed down the management a bit. So not long ago, a partner joined, and we kind of opened up another department of managing social network accounts as well. So we founded this new project called Twin Fin, and basically we do organize the events and take care of some athletes, but also have these social media worlds going on in our offices. So it's fun, very challenging for me, because I had to sort of like start again a few years ago. But I love challenges, and it's been really fun.
That's awesome to hear. And it sounds like you're thriving, man. Like, as we both know, post multiple year championship tour career, whether you're a surfer or a staff member, to be clear, doesn't always redound to success afterwards, right? But you sound like you're doing great, man. Was the transition difficult? Obviously, we talked about the injury, but, did you find the transition just from being full-time competitive surfer, paid professional surfer, to your current role, was it difficult at any point, or were you just ready for something new?
I have to be honest with you. I was mentally really withdrawn already back in 2014, my last year on tour. I also found out I was going to be a dad the year after, which was always a goal of mine. So that plus my knee wasn't, I was, as you know, wild card for 2014 with an injury wild card. I struggled with a knee injury. And then the beginning of 14, I was actually in Australia during during that Australian leg of 3 events. And between Gold Coast and actually I started really well on the Gold Coast, beating Jordy. And then I was in Sydney working with my shaper Chile. And we actually had a really solid swell in Sydney. And I went for Rio, like a close out Rio, and my front foot slipped, my bad knee, my front foot slipped, and actually I did another grade 1 tear. I had to skip Margaret and went straight to Bells to work on rehab and tried to do that contest. I did really well rehabbing and stuff, but I ended up losing to John. And you know what, the knee was just not feeling good anymore, you know. So the whole year was a little bit shaky. I had a few results that year. I didn't do that bad, but my mind was just on something else already. So, you know, it was a tough path for me to qualify. And I think all those years where I was trying to qualify kind of, you know, the whole package kind of started getting a little bit more heavy on my head, you know, in terms of tiredness. So I was ready for it, you know, totally.
That makes sense. And as you said, like there's those atmospheric things that are almost outside of your control, like between the knee injury, but also, as you said, like how exciting fatherhood is. And it's like, it sounds like the universe kind of lined a few things up to help you transition post CT, you know?
And definitely having really great sponsors. You know, I was lucky enough to, I don't know if it's the appropriate word, but I was really well in terms of always I have a good perception that I always had really nice projects and supports around me. Maybe because I was the first Portuguese to qualify, you know, all that attention that I got, and also always being like this straightforward, you know, kind of clean athlete. I had really great support from all the brands around me. Non-endemic brands as well. So I kind of did good on that outside surfing world, you know, in terms of image, in terms of endorsement. So I knew that I had a good field to work on after surfing in terms of connections, in terms of contacts. You know, and my first real project after I quit competing was actually something that I really wanted to do, which was a documentary about my life, because it was really different from the average surfer, you know, growing up in Lisbon on the 90s and trying to be a surfer was something really weird. So I approached Red Bull back then on that exact moment of wanting to do this documentary. And Red Bull was always the brand that, you know, what do you want to do? What's your dream? What's your goal? Tell us about, we want to help you out, you know. And I told them about the project and they said, let's go. So 2015, right after I quit, I was for 18 months doing a documentary. I had the support of Quicksilver, Red Bull, Mafra, municipality, you know, and other players. But it was sort of like stepping outside of my comfort zone. I kind of put the shoes of the executive producer, you know, and it was still, you know, quite costly project for me. And it gave me that sense of, okay, now I need to be sort of like a little bit more organized outside the sports world, you know, and that kind of helped me sort of. During that time, those 18 months, I had conversations with Frederico, with Vasco Ribeiro. You know, I really wanted to become a manager because I felt that I wanted to pass my experience for the youngsters. And I ended up starting to work with Vasco right after the movie. I told him I have to stay focused on this project, and after that we can probably start working or a conversation at least. And that's what happened. You know, I started working with Vasco and then worked a little bit with Teresa Bonvalo, and then, you know, I started the React Sports Management project and off I went, you know. So with all the connections I had, it was just paving it itself, you know. So that was my sort of like reborning or whatever you call it, you know.
Oh yeah, the rebirth. Yeah, well, I was going to say too, like, I think between your experience as a world-class athlete and even how you highlighted, like, you were able to operate and be really comfortable as a world-class athlete, both with like surf brands and non-endemic brands. I think that probably set you up for such success coming out of it and moving into sport management, moving into event management, or even your current role at Twinfin. I am curious though, in 2025, like, do you still watch the webcast? Do you still play fantasy? Are you on WhatsApp threads, like criticizing scores? Like, how much do you watch the CT these days?
Less, definitely less.
Well-adjusted man.
Less. No, the thing is, I've got 3 kids. You know, it's the little difference. You know, when you have 3 kids and you have, you know, timetables and schedules, and you know, you have to manage a company nowadays.
Sure.
We're almost 10 people working already. So it's you know, have to wake up early to take the kids to school, and so you know. We are in this time zone of the world that sometimes it's not easy. Yeah. But of course I follow. Of course I know what's going on. Of course I have an opinion, you know, regarding the tour, what's going on, and where I would like it to go, you know. Yeah. So yeah, I'm still in contact for sure. I do fantasy every now and then, not all, but yeah.
How do you do? Are you good at it? Are you bad at it?
No, I suck. I don't know how. I thought, you know, when I started playing, I thought I was going to kick all my friends' asses, and suddenly they're way better than me, you know. And,
I was talking to Mitch Salazar about it, and I'm like, I actually think knowing more about the sport's bad for fantasy, because you're like, that's a good pick, and then you're like, what happened? It's like,
totally, you know. That's why I think I left it a bit. You know, I don't play it as much because I got so like run over by my friends, and I'm like, I better like step away because you know it's not looking good.
Responsible,
but yeah, it's been fun to watch the last 10 years actually. Yeah. It's now 10 years that I quit, you know, and went quite fast. Yeah. And yeah, you know, it's been a crazy roller coaster for pro surfing. Yes. But I'm always going to be a protector, you know, and a defendant of the institution that gave me, you know, everything I have today. So, you know, but of course there's things that I don't like, that I dislike, and things that I really like. So it's normal. It's life, you know.
Well, I'm still stuck on the roller coaster, man. You're just looking at me being like, what are you doing on there? You got to help me get off. Well, we have, I think we're recording March 12th. In a few days, the third stop of the 2025 championship tour, the Mayo Rip Curl Pro Portugal, will commence its opening window. So our episode's going to drop during the event. I'm going to mine you for some insights here. So for our listeners who have never been to Supertubos, how would you describe the wave? Well, it's, if you're lucky enough to get real Supertubos, which is always unpredictable, you know, and I wish we'd had like those trade winds, like sort of like places like Hawaii that, you know, you go there in the winter and there's always trades, or pretty much all the time. Over here, it doesn't really happen like that. You know, we've been having a crazy winter in terms of trades. Supertubos actually likes a little bit of northerly as well. So northeast would be the perfect wind for Supertubos, the cleanest. The forecast looks okay, you know, a few days with offshore winds. Swell's not going to be massive this year, but you know, if you're lucky enough to see real Supertubos going on, it's an amazing wave. It's a very, very throwy and punchy beach break. You know, there's always going to be barrels or big air sections. It's definitely not a flat wave, and you know, one of the best beach breaks in the world, I'd say. We've been watching some amazing conditions out there. The one year, I think was 2 years ago, it got so big that I've never really watched it that big in my life, you know, and the contest was going on. So it was amazing to see. And yeah, it's just like a barrel event, you know, you have to expect a lot of barrels and a lot of airs, because that's what the wave kind of asks for. But then it's also a very tricky wave, you know, it's hard
to position yourself sometimes. There's a lot of rips all the time with the tides changing. So you need to be smart, a smart competitor. Sometimes, you can be the guy that is sitting for 20 minutes, kind of like not seeing where the waves are coming from. Or you can be the guy that in 2 minutes has a 10 and a 9, because you just got that place on the lineup where 2 sets came and you were the perfect place. So, it's not it's you cannot rely that much on that wave. You have to be kind of like active out there in the water. And actively search for the waves, not just like sit and wait. It's going to come for you,
There's certain waves on tour that you could probably call are more specialist waves than not, like a Jeffreys Bay or a Te Hopu. Like it's not just that they favor locals, but they favor a certain type of surfer. And then there's more neutral waves, like, lower trestles is probably a pretty neutral wave, where it's like when you get on the CT, everyone's so elite that everyone can perform really, really well there. How would you describe, on its day when it's firing and when it's doing its thing, how would you describe Supertubos? Do you think it's more of a specialist wave, or do you think it's a kind of more of a neutral wave for all the CT surfers?
Well, I would say it's a more neutral wave. There's not really specialist surfer out there. Just a guy that likes really comfortable in barrels, and tendency you've got the Hawaiians that do really good, or you got the Brazilians. They're also very used to surf fast beach breaks,
right?
Like Fernando Noronha and those types of waves. So tendency, all the beach breaks in Brazil are really kind of like Supertubos a bit, like barreling, kind of like shifting a lot. So that's, I would say those are sort of like the favorite surfers out there.
In and around, your very busy professional and personal life at the moment. When you tune in the coming days for this event, are there any surfers in particular that you're going to be paying attention to or making sure that you try to check in for their heats?
Well, I think Italo is probably one of the most dangerous surfers out there, because he's been coming a lot to Portugal. He calls it the second house, and it does come more than, way more than all the other field of guys.
Right.
So he has quite a bit of experience in surfing very numerous different days out there, and he feels really comfortable. So I'd say Italo will be a guy to pay close attention for sure. With Medina being injured, it opens even more his chances, I'd say.
Yeah.
But then I think, Griffin or Ethan, they can do good anywhere, and that's when the tour is very interesting today, because you've kind of have this group of guys that can do good pretty much in every single event, and they're really good at it. So really hungry too. So I'd say definitely the top, the usual suspects will be very dangerous out there, but also if it's which I don't think it's going to be like a big event in terms of conditions. I would see Baron, Mamiya being a threat out there for sure, because you can get barrels. He's so good at the barrel, it's kind of scary, So
right.
If the waves get enough, the forecast keeps changing. It's been changing quite a bit and fast. He can be a threat if it's solid and big for sure.
All right, good. I'm just making adjustments to my fantasy team as you and I talk about this. But yeah, everyone, make sure you check out the Mayo Rip Curl Pro Portugal presented by Corona Cerro, March 15th through the 25th. It will stream live, worldsurfleague.com and the WSL app. We're going to take a quick break to get a word in from our sponsors, and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the lineup. I am Dave Prodan here with Portugal's Tiago Pires. Tiago, we talked a little bit about your post-CT documentary, Saka. I don't want to dive too much into that because it's such a good film and I want everyone to check it out. But you did mention that, and it's a huge like awesome narrative within the film, how you didn't have a very typical path towards the championship tour. Can you give us just a little bit of background about that? Like where you were born, what your upbringing was like, and how you found yourself kind of cascading towards mixing it up with the world's best surfers.
Yeah. So I was born in Lisbon, right? Actually, really close to my office nowadays, in Alcântara, just kind of like below the bridge, our 25th of April bridge that looks like the Golden Gate, So born in Lisbon, raised in Lisbon, and then Ericeira was, since I was a baby, my holiday spot. My parents used to go to Ericeira for summer holidays. And it's funny because until I was 5 or 6, I couldn't stand the ocean. Like I had to be away from the ocean. I was so scared of it that I would cry on the beach all day. With turning my back to the ocean, I wouldn't even want to see it. And then I think the summer when I was 7 or 8 or whatever, something just clicked, and I started boogie boarding on the rocks in San Lorenzo. And it was just the opposite. It kind of like I went from being super scared to the guy that couldn't live, that couldn't be out of the ocean, all rash to my body, just stayed all day long on the ocean. But it would just last for 2 months, because then I would go back to Lisbon, and it'd be just a random, city urban kid that spends his weekends playing basketball or volleyball or soccer or whatever on the streets. It wasn't until the summer of 91, I was 11, that I had probably like 3 summers of being a bodyboarder. I was actually doing good already on bodyboarder, like doing proper turns. That's our summer group was, we're like 16 kids on the beach. My older brother was surfing, and he told me like, tomorrow you're gonna go surf either you want or not. Finish with this bodyboarder thing. Tomorrow you'll be surfing. I'm like, why? So the thing is that next day I went surfing and I borrowed a board, and the first wave I stood up and felt this amazing feeling and connection that it kind of changed my life right away. So I had to sort of like, in a way, tried to change all my gear, which wasn't easy because I remember back then just to get a board was a mission,
Right.
Let alone that the boards were super expensive. I had no money. My parents couldn't afford to buy me a board. So it was like a process. I had to sell my bodyboarder gear, my fins, my board, and slowly like start borrowing boards to surf. And then I think my father kind of offered me my first board, maybe the next summer in 92. I was 12 years old. So that's when I started surfing. I started surfing, I was 11, but mainly when I was 12, I had a board, and then I only surfed in summer. I went back to Lisbon during the winter. Surfing couldn't be part of my life. So it wasn't until I was super competitive as a kid. I was already back during that time. I was a volleyball champion in Lisbon. I used to play volleyball. And then it wasn't until there was this TV show, this program TV, like Radical. It was called Portugal Radical. And it was like a 15-minute show about surfing, bodyboarding, or skateboarding on TV. And then I saw one of the shows, and it was showing like this national tour for surf national tour for kids. And they had like 3 categories. It was under 14, under 16, and under 18. And I was like 13 years old. And I was like, whoa, you can compete in surfing. So my brother was, back then my brother was competing on the national level, sort of. My brother was a really good surfer, but a really bad competitor. And that explains why he became an artist after a few years of trying. So he never had that competitive fire in him. So my mom had to kind of like deal with that frustration of my brother. And then she had the youngest saying, I want to be a surfer too. I want to compete. And she was like, oh my God, another one, with these psychological problems and frustrations about defeats and whatever. So, but I really approached the Ericeira Surf Club, which was the club that we were closer to in terms of, there wasn't many clubs back then, but we always felt this connection with Ericeira because it was our holiday spot. So yeah, I joined the Ericeira Surf Club. They start taking me to those national events for kids, and then that just brought the fire into me, and kind of forgot about all the other sports in Lisbon. I started traveling on the weekends, catching the bus in Lisbon. That would take 2.5 hours to Ericeira. Nowadays it's half an hour. So back then the bus trip, it was 2.5 hours. I would do it right after school on Fridays and spend the whole weekend surfing in Ericeira, just in time to come back on the Sunday evening with hitchhiking with a friend. So that was how I started progressing and as a surfer, surfing on the weekends in Ericeira, getting back to my normal city life during the week. I had, during that time, a lot went on, and when I was 14, I was European champion.
Yeah.
So my kind of progression curve was, was really crazy. I was just, I don't know if you say the word obstinated.
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Well, like when you're crazy, you can't take your mind out of something.
Yeah.
I was like that with surfing, and I would spend the whole.
Oh, go on, please.
No, yeah, it's just to tell you, I didn't have much time to surf. So when I surfed during the weekends, no matter what the conditions were, I would do 3 surfs on a Saturday, 3 surfs on a Sunday, just spend the whole time, eat on the beach and surf the whole day, because I love it so much and I wanted to win those little national events.
Yeah.
So that's how it started. And then when I was 14, I went the Portuguese Surfing Federation took Portugal to a European ISA thing, and I was the first ever Portuguese to win a European event, bring an European title for Portugal, and then got sponsored by Quicksilver right after, and then it started like there. But the one thing that I think it stands me aside from the rest of the surfers is probably that I never dropped school. And I said to my mom, please let me surf, let me miss a few days of school to go to Hawaii, to Australia, whatever, later on. But you can be assured that I'm going to finish high school. So until I was 18, I was stuck in school with a promise to my mom that I would never drop off school because of surfing, because to tell our parents that, you wanted to be a professional surfer in Portugal back then in 96 or 7 or 8 was being sort of lunatic, So yeah, of course the titles and the sponsorship kind of helped my mom also to open up her mind a bit more.
Yeah. And
by the time when I was 18, I was runner-up on the ISA World Juniors or ISA World Championships, and so that kind of was my showing up or becoming part of the surfing industry was when I was 18 and was runner-up on the ISA. But yeah, long way.
It sounds like even kind of the volleyball piece, like you were always like very athletic and competitive, and then that almost like cosmically got married to this obsession with the ocean and surfing. And you kind of see this a lot with really high achieving and elite level surfers, is that they tend to fall into 2 camps, right? There's like the dynastic, I'm a 3rd generation surfer. My dad was a pro. His dad was a shaper. And, I'm at Lower Trestles or Snapper Rocks or the North Shore or whatever. And they have all these advantages, but they also have amazing waves and they're just amazing surfers because of it. And then you get the other camp that kind of, like yourself, didn't didn't come from like readily available like resources or waves or even like a model for professional surfing. I would even put like surfers in Florida. Obviously surfing's huge in Florida, but like they don't have huge waves. But then you get like a Kelly Slater or a Corey Lopez or a Damian Hobgood, and they're amazing at like pipeline and Teohopu. And I think there's something in that where it's like if you don't have easy access to it, it creates a huge motivation in you. If you ever, does that sound like in the ballpark of accurate for you?
Definitely, and I really believe it creates this appetite, this will and this motivation, like you said, to do it even more because it's not in front of you, So whenever you have the access to, you're gonna you're never gonna be blamed for not trying, or whatever. You'll always go 100% in, all or nothing kind of thing. And that's, it's, in surfing, in this sport, if you have that type of mentality, you'll end up winning a few heats just on the mental side of it,
Right.
Let alone, of course, you need to be a skilled surfer and to be amongst the field, but amongst the other guys. But the mental part plays a big, big role in our sport, for sure.
Yeah. The interesting thing too, right, is it's the 90s, and I think like, you and I are similarly aged. We're both in our 40s, and we probably distinctly remember life before like the internet, right? And how like everything is accessible and information's accessible and web clips and social media, et cetera. And, in the 90s, you kind of had to have like tactile, physical, in your face examples to get information. And I think what's so remarkable about you is you were the first to qualify from Portugal. And I'm curious, like you obviously had success in Europe and you were traveling around younger, sponsorships and competitive success, but like, even at a young age when you started competing, was there something in your head that was like, I am going to qualify, like I am going to do this? And I'm curious if there was a moment or if it was more gradual for you.
I met José Seabra, my coach, my lifetime coach, let's say, someone who until today we're still connected in projects. It's funny. But I met him when, he actually approached me because he was editor of the magazine, the Surf Portugal magazine.
Right.
So he approached me when I was 15 and saw something special on that kid back then. And he always had, Zé was a guy that he kind of did, he went to the US when he was a teenager to study. So he lived in Brazil, he lived in the US, and he had sort of like in Portugal, he had a broader mind, and it was always, it was known to be like a big wave surfer back then. He was very respected as a pro surfer in Portugal. He was also editor of the surf magazine, Surf Portugal. So he approached me and a few other kids because he wanted to start coaching.
Yeah.
But with myself, it was sort of like a little bit more serious, and he saw something in my eyes or in the way I was doing things that it kind of got him a little bit more psyched, and he wanted me to go to the US for, to finish my school and stuff like that. It didn't pass in my mom's eyes. But yes, he had these crazy, like back then, crazy ideas that are super normal nowadays, but back then in the 90s were super out of the box. And he saw that I was a very organized, very determined kid, and my skill level was something a little bit out of the normal as well in Portugal. So I really liked his ideas and his seriousness about training. There was no trainers back then. There was not one single coach, I think, that I've heard of when I started, working with him. So it was all very new and young, but we sort of connected so well that from my 16, when I turned 16, we started working closely and very intensively, and we started speaking about wanting to be like a world champ, but we wanted to reach the CT.
Yeah.
But I still remember, we would say that in magazines and little interviews and whatever. And the community in Portugal, a lot of good friends, all the guys that I'd respect back then, they would call me like cocky. They wouldn't believe this. This kid is crazy. Who does he think he is? So it's it sounded like arrogant almost, that I wanted to achieve a big goal. So
yeah. But there's no way to succeed on tour if you don't have that mentality too, right? Like.
But we Portuguese were so far away from the tour.
Sure.
We had 1 or 2 events per year in Portugal. If you had luck, in that year.
Yeah.
So the pro surfing caravan would pass by. They were so far away from us, and Portuguese thought that it wasn't accomplishable, So it was never going to happen, So I had to be called cocky. I had to be called arrogant.
Right.
I had to be called crazy, it's a funny story. I was being sponsored by Quicksilver, but back then Quicksilver in Portugal was being run by a local distributor, Portuguese businessman.
Yeah.
And I remember telling him when I was 16 that I wanted to start doing the world tour and start doing European events, getting away from Portugal. And he said, "What? Are you crazy? I want you to stay in Portugal and compete,
Right.
And I was like, "No, but I want to be one of the best." And he was like, "No, I want you to stay home." So this was the mentality, So people knew it was sort of like, there was a few little examples of Portuguese guys like Rodrigo Heredia, Bruno Charnec, Abubas, and João Antunes and Gregorio that had tried to do 1 or 2 events here and there in Australia and California, but never came up with results. So for a sponsor standpoint, they were like, "No, I want you to stay here and win these national events to give me returns," So I had to fight all this sort of like mentality in Portugal, and that's why I think my path is a little different not to say hugely different from all my peers,
Totally. I mean, the other thing that I've noticed from my perch, watching people matriculate to the championship tour, and it happens whether, they come from like a really kind of dynastic situation in surfing, or they come from the relative outsiders, is you look up so much to your heroes on the championship tour. And in your case, you got your Micks and your Joels and your Kellys and your Andys and your Tajas and the whole nine. When you finally qualified, when you were on the tour in 2008, do you remember how you felt coming up against kind of probably people that you looked up to for a while? Was it intimidating, or were you just kind of like, look, I have to be able to humanize them and make them mortal so I can compete with them?
That's a good question. I was lucky enough, to have a few wildcard spots before I qualified. So,
right.
I had a few sparks of competing and being close to that talent, to the Euros, like you say. They were actually my Euros.
Yeah.
And then when I qualified, it was a big thing in Portugal, very big. I remember it was like a national thing, It was on the news all over the country, any kind of news platform, and it was big. So, and I had also a few examples of guys, like European guys, that would have qualify the next year. They had very, very hard first years, like rookies.
Yeah.
Years, and I knew that the first year was very, very important to stay and not be disqualified and not be out of the tour on your first rookie year, because I don't know, if you get kicked out on your first year, it's sort of like the dream is dead, the dream is over. And it's, even for a sponsor's perspective, you're like, oh, see, you reached it and it was gone out of there. So me and Zé, we were very serious about, we need to stay on the first year. We'll do whatever it takes to stay on for the second year. And I did feel the nerves of my first year. I did feel the nerves big time, like in Australia. I felt that I surfed badly, not to say other words.
You can. We're an adult podcast.
I can swear. Okay.
Yeah, knock yourself out.
Yeah. But I surfed like shit, and I was so nervous. My jelly legs, I couldn't recognize myself in the water. It's horrible. Not until I got to the barrel waves.
Yeah.
Where, with a few wipeouts here and there, I always had that attitude of going for it. So, and that's when I started getting a few results in my first year. I actually ended up with a third place in Bali and beating Kelly on that crazy year of his. But, in terms of the venues where you need to surf and rely more on your turns and, being, being perfect when you're surfing, I was having troubles. But, because we really wanted to stay, I opted to put a lot of energy on the QS and maintain my spot. And that's how I maintained my rookie year. I maintained myself as a QS soldier. Yeah. And on the second year, it was so different. I was so more relaxed, and I knew what judges were looking for, where they would crush me in the score. So I just felt that I belonged to the tour. First year, you don't feel like you belong unless you're like a Medina or John or whatever. Right. Even John, I don't know if you had a first good year. Tour,
he and Gabe both came in 2011 at the halfway point, and we've talked about this before, but I want to get your read on this too. Like Gabe came in with a bit of fanfare because he'd won, King of the Groms and everything, and John, he'd actually broken his back at Backdoor earlier in the year, and he was, for as famous as he was and popular as he was, like, I remember the vibe at the time was like, he's good in barrels, but I don't know if he's going to make it on the CT, like performance surfing wise. And hopefully he does. And it's so funny looking back now, but like, I think he evolved a lot when he got to the CT as well. I think he changed quite a lot in his game, but it's almost like John qualified under the radar with low expectations for himself, compared to like, a comparison would be like Kalohe Andino, who I think qualified the next year, and like Nike's putting out like he's going to win the world title his rookie year kind of ad campaigns, and the expectations were radical.
Totally. I totally agree with that. I remember John being very, very low key on the QS. And I remember even saying to my friends, like, I don't think you'll qualify. Yeah, because it would fall a lot, John. It would fall a lot. He would try big airs and stuff, but with a very low percentage of success finishing. And so I think the big difference on his surfing, of course, he was always amazing in a barrel. Yeah, his surfing was a little bit funky and weird, a bit, comparing to the big boys.
Yeah, real like skater style when he qualified, like surfed like a skater, like more. Not that that's a bad thing, but I know what you mean. It was really different.
This guy is calling me. Do you know this guy?
Oh, I know that guy. Tell him I say hi and ask him when we're going to the Mentawais.
He'll wait now.
Good. Leave that in.
But it wasn't until John started having, like, he started doing, completing all his airs, then that it was like, it made a huge difference on himself. And then he qualified. And I remember like on his first, I think I surfed against him and beat him in San Francisco. I think it was that year.
right? Yeah.
I
That's
actually,
2011.
I actually beat him in that event. It was probably his first event on tour or whatever.
Pretty
I
early,
remember
right? Yeah.
Medina won that event
Yeah.
as a rookie.
And
He
he
that
won in
event.
France too, right? Like he beat
And
Julian.
won in France,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's crazy.
And
That's
I had
such
John,
yeah.
and I remember beating him on the second round or something in that event. And it was
Yeah.
like a small day in Ocean Beach, just turns.
Yeah.
And it was sort of like an easy target yet back then.
Right.
Not before it became like a monster, but yeah, it's two complete different surfers and paths, let's say.
And anyone that comes to you for advice on how to take on John, you should just tell him that and be like, I took him out at Ocean Beach. It wasn't that hard. Like, you know, but you may actually make a good point. Cause I remember this too. Like, as you pointed out, like probably since he was like 8, he was always a threat in tubes. And the other parts of his surfing were kind of wet clay. And then I actually think the next part he refined was like sticking those big airs, like especially those big backhand rotations. Cause then in 2012, that's how he beat Joel Parkinson in Rio, right? And he was just doing these big airs like on these little lefts, and everyone's like, wow, John's like an air guy now. And I think both those weapons, like the tube riding and the air game, gave him enough space to further develop his like technical rail surfing. And then, you know, a few years later, you see what he does at Margaret River. It is kind of fascinating to think of it in that case where it's like, he's got this superpower that's going to buy him enough time to develop that one. Mm-hmm. And now he's got 2. And if he's humble enough, he'll work on this other stuff, which he obviously did. But it's interesting insight to hear you talk about it.
For sure. I totally agree with you on that. And I think he did quite a good job, you know, catching up with his repertoire. What the kind of stuff he's been doing, especially during when he came on that Margaret event, was something, you know, out of this world, and no one, I think no one else gets close to it. You know, surfing the rail with that amount of speed and power and control. It's kind of like elevate him to a place that, you know, got him a few world titles, and, you know, he'll get as many world titles as you want. Actually, it's just a mental thing. But yeah, good surfers.
Yeah, he's pretty good. We're gonna take one more break to get one more word in from our sponsors, and when we come back, we will wrap it up with Tiago Pires. All right, welcome back to the lineup. I'm Dave Prodan here with Portugal's Tiago Pires, the very first Portuguese surfer to qualify for the championship tour. Tiago, it's been so good to catch up with you and get, you know, insights from where you're at today, you know, the beginnings of your career as a professional surfer, and just how you view surfing with such a unique just prism. It's so always cool to talk to you. You know, when you think about the current state of Portuguese surfing, or even more broadly European surfing, there are world-class waves in Europe. It produces world-class surfers. Like, obviously, you have your day job, you have your career, you got to focus on that. But like, how active are you in working with some of these surfers that are still trying to make the championship tour, coming out of Portugal and maybe Europe more broadly?
Yeah, that's a question that goes in with my working day by day thing. You know, a few years back, you know, myself and Zé Seabra, my coach from back in the day. That's why I mentioned before that I still do stuff with him. We acknowledge that European surfing had very, very small representativity on the world tour, you know, but nowadays you can't really go out and say that you don't have support, that you don't have the events, that you don't have this and that, like we used to say back in the day, because it was true.
Right.
Nowadays there's a lot of support and a lot of investment nowadays, I would say in the last 10 to 15 years, you know, in pro surfing in Europe. So we sort of have all the means to have amazing surfers. We have the waves, we have investment. We have support from brands, core and non-endemic brands. We have sort of like, we have the thing ready to, to create world tour surfers. And why is it not happening? So we kind of had this conversation, and we came out to a conclusion that a lot of talent was being kind of like misguided, because there's this boom of schools in Europe, surf schools,
right,
and coaches, and level 1 coaches, level 2, level 3, level 15, or whatever you want to call them. But none of those coaches has any experience in pro surfing, or very few, and
right,
in the few that you have, they were already working with good surfers and doing good. But the rest of the talent that was being brought up in Europe was kind of like left alone, or being misguided by coaches that didn't really have enough experience to mentor these careers. So within the Twin Fin umbrella already, myself, Zé, we had a few partners coming along. We pitched EDP, an electricity brand from Portugal that also invests in events, in surfing in general, about this project that we wanted to do to sort of like capitalize on the European talent. So I think we were really lucky, because we kind of came along this project kind of came along at the same time as the necessity of these brands, of these projects to go greener, on the way they're producing energy.
Sure.
So it was a really good match, and we pitched them in the right moment, and they really trusted us with this project, which is called EDP Surf for Tomorrow. And basically it's a surfing, like a high performance surfing program that we do. And I'm sort of like responsible for drawing this project, this yearly project, and choosing the team of surfers we work with. So we've been working with these kids for 4 years already. We're going into the 5th year, to this year in 2025, which for me is pretty amazing. A non-endemic brand sponsoring this type of project for 4 years and going into the 5th year. And I brought Zé, my coach, because I know his experience and I know his approach on coaching, which is a little bit different than most of the coaches around. And I really, it's a little bit more holistic and a little bit more truthful. And I don't know, I know Zé has the experience to build a career and to help the kids reaching the top. So we started this project 4 years ago, and we're still going and going stronger each time. The kids, we brought them in, they were like 13, 14, now they're like 18. It's been amazing to watch them blooming and becoming really, really big threats. I'm talking about the likes of Odriozola's brothers, Kai, Hans, Annette, Echebari. And now we do have a little Jaime Vezelko, who's 15. We have Guilherme Ribeiro, who's a little older. But we very carefully select these kids that we believe that they have the means and they have the good mentality, because like I said before, surfing is a lot about mentality and a lot about being able to cope with all this unpredictable life that we have. Of course, high performance sports, when you're playing at the top level, is always unpredictable, but surfing is that, plus the fact that you have to deal with the waves, you have to deal with so much variables that you don't control, that you really need to get ready, to get a strong mind ready for all these big challenges coming your way. So just talking about this program, EDP, and we're still going. It's part of my work. I'm here in the office doing a bit of that work as well. It's one of the projects I carry. And it kind of answers your question.
Definitely. Yeah. And I think that mental piece is so right, and it comes up quite often. I know like Mick Fanning, I've talked about it quite a lot. And, the idea that in surfing, as far as professional sports go, there's probably more dynamic variables with your field of play than any other sport, right? Like
Totally.
Every venue's different, every wave's different, every moment is different in terms of the weather and the conditions and the things you can control, right? Like your technique, your equipment, your physical fitness are all good, but probably the most important one is just being psychologically sharp. So
you could compare it to tennis and imagining that you're trying to beat the other guy and you're in this court playing, but suddenly you don't have the balls. No one throws the balls at you, so you have no balls to play.
Right, there you go.
And this is surfing.
And there's a pack of wolves circling the court every now and then.
Yeah.
It's a really good point. I think that next generation of surfers are very, very fortunate to work with you. And before you go, we did reach out to our community at the Lineup Pod on Instagram. Got a bunch of questions for Tiago Pires, but we've whittled them down to 3. First question is from @Haru_Marsden, who asks, where was the longest wave you've ever ridden?
Skeleton Bay for sure.
Great answer. Next question is from, you kind of answered this a little bit, but I'm curious to get a more direct question, is from @Kike Surf Coach, who asks, will you consider becoming even more involved in coaching? Because you're pretty elevated at this point, but maybe they're asking, like, are we going to see you on the beach, clipboard, Richard Dog Marsh style?
To be honest, I don't think I will. I think I've came as close as I could be with this project and selecting another coach that I really trust. I like to mentor. Yeah. And when I started doing React and working with Vasco, I was never their coach. I was always their manager. I would mentor their career, choose, try to pave the way with them, but always brought some other coach with me because, to be honest, being a coach is very hard. It's a big marriage with an athlete, and I've done it for 15 years, almost 20, being an athlete and being close to a coach, and I really don't want that life for me. So.
Fair enough. Last one that we picked is from @JBGoma72, who says, life after tour, do you still surf every day or at least try to surf every day?
Certainly don't surf every day. I wish I could, but then I don't think Twin Fin would be. I would even be sitting here. I'd probably be on a public bench, speaking to you and typing on my computer. I think you need to be, to succeed in life, you need to sort of like dig deep and really commit to. And when I started diverting into this sort of more entrepreneurial life, I was confronted to this reality. Either you go like full on, and you work and you get things done, or you'll never be at the level. You'll never succeed. If I'm surfing every day, I'm not here in the office with the team, things are not happening. So I wish I could surf a bit more, but I try not to miss the good sessions, the good days. But I still miss a few, which get me a bit hangry. But then I go and make another coffee and forget about it. And
grumpy boss, yeah.
I know that I'll have to be fit for the kids later on, and and enjoy my family life, which is probably the biggest achievement of my life, is to have such a great family.
Yeah, I mean, you and I are at the polar opposite ends of the surfing ability spectrum. But I personally, I've also found, I've talked to a few folks like this too, where it is, when I was younger, I felt like I had to surf every single day as much as possible just to stay as sharp as possible. And as you get older and you have a job, you've got kids, responsibilities, it's just not possible. And sometimes I'll go a couple weeks where I'm like, I just couldn't get out there. And I surprise myself when I get back. So I'm like, wow, I'm actually better than I was before. Like maybe going every day, I was just like emphasizing bad habits. I'll bet when you go out, you still got some zip, man.
Well, let's say sometimes my mind thinks I'm gonna do stuff that my body doesn't really
Yeah, I get
do,
that too.
and that's kind of weird, you know. And in being in shape and on a good form for so many years,
Yeah.
it's quite weird sometimes. But I still, you know, I can still go like crazy in the barrel, so it still psychs me. The
for you.
turns, you know, I don't go as hard because after I quit, I was actually had two operations on my knee, so
Yeah.
I try not to go as hard as big on the turns, but barrels definitely I don't hold back, and I hope I can take it as further as long as I can, you know, because it's definitely the thing in surfing.
You never did hold back, man. Well, thanks to everyone that wrote in at the lineup pod. We appreciate those questions. We're now down to our final segment. This is the lightning round. 10 questions for you to answer as quickly as you can. First question. If you could only have one board setup for the rest of your life, single fin, twin fin, thruster, quad bonzer, or finless, which would you choose?
Thruster.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Burrito or pizza?
Pizza.
Last book you read?
Did I finish?
No, you can be reading now, whatever.
Well, the last book I read, I read Barbarian Days.
Good
a
one.
bit. Didn't finish yet.
Best surf film ever?
Oof. Tough one. I'd say no one's going to even know about this movie, but I'd say Litmus.
You know what? More lineup listeners than you think may know about that, but that's a great pick. I think that's the first time we've had that. 227 episodes. Look at that. All right. Next question. What is one wave you never have to go back to?
Whoa. I think the cave.
Oh, interesting.
Because I actually named the wave, but I had some bad encounters on the last few years, and I made myself a promise is that since I had my first kid, and I found myself in the hospital lying on the bed with stitches on my body, all over my body, I said it's not worth the risk anymore, so I'll leave it to the kids.
That probably tells listeners everything they need to know about the cave. If you could only surf one wave for the rest of your life, and you can dreamcast it, perfect conditions, just you and your friends, whatever you like, which wave would it be?
Whoa, that's a tough one. I'd say Kosher's at home, being very local, but it just has it all, you know, has barrels, has really good steep sections to carve. So for me, it's my type of wave.
Nice. Best person to share a lineup with?
Miguel Forte.
Okay. Worst person to share a lineup with?
Probably Johnny Boy Gomes.
Okay, last one. Finish this sentence. I will next achieve a state of happiness by
watching my 3 kids surfing.
Wonderful. Tiago, my friend, so good to see you again. So good to talk to you. Congratulations on your professional surfing career. Congratulations on all your success at Twin Fin. Thank you for coming on the lineup, and I look forward to talking to you again really soon.
So cool, Dave. Thank you so much. Happy to be here. Happy to be with my surf family. All the best, and we'll be seeing each other